Welcome to the Diverse Bookshelf. I'm Samia Aziz, celebrating the power of literature and the voices of authors and changemakers from the global majority. Join me as we explore the stories that inspire, connect, and transform our world. Let's uncover the stories that truly matter together. On this week's episode, I'm joined by the incredible poet, author, and activist, Salena Godden. A leading voice in British poetry, Salena is known for her electrifying performances and fearless writing. Her work spans poetry, memoir, fiction, and activism, with themes of love, grief, identity, and justice running through her work. She is the author of Mrs. Death, With Love, Grief and Fury, and the memoir Springfield Road, and has been widely recognised for her contributions to literature and spoken word. In our conversations, we explore the deep connections between love and loss, the urgency of caring for our planet, the passage of time, and how memory shapes identity. Salena's words are raw, powerful, and filled with both tenderness and fire. This is a conversation you won't want to miss. Salena, hello. Welcome to the Diverse Bookshelf podcast. It's so wonderful to have you on the show today. How are you doing?
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's lovely to be here. Hello. Hello.
You are such what I like to call like a versatile writer. So you write poetry, but you've also written a memoir, you've written a novel. I feel like you just said that you're working on short stories. Like you write in so many different forms. I'm really intrigued to know, how do you feel like you change as you change between forms? Is Salena the poetry writer or the poet? Is Salena the poet different to Salena the novelist? And is Salena the novelist different to Salena who was writing her own memoir?
Whoa. I think Salena the writer is who I am. So the writer is always the same. But then, because I was just telling you about this horror short story I was just writing, so I've been spending the last couple of weeks enveloped in a very kind of dark world, a very dark voice, and a very different narrator. So you lend your pen to different voices. If there was any stark difference, I think the difference between summer Salena doing festivals and performances, performer Salena is different to writing Salena at home at Utah. In the winter is when I try and get most of my writing done, and then in the summer I usually dye my hair and be running around and having the best time with poetry people and writers and book people. So yeah, I think the most stark difference is I call them my writing monster and gigging monster. And I'm ruled by these two monsters, really. So it's more, I think the public performer is different to the at home as you're meeting me now in January, and it's all dark and frosty and yeah.
Yeah, that's so interesting because you're so well known for your performances of your work. And I've seen some and it's so powerful. And obviously, reading your work is an extremely powerful experience as well. But for me, that's a very personal experience because I'm reading it. And so it's different. And sometimes this happens when you've read a poem and then you hear it performed by the person that's written it. And it sounds completely different to how you imagined it, but it's just so wonderful. But I wonder, what does that do to your relationship with the words that you've actually written? Does it change the poem once you do perform it? Does it change its meaning? Does it change, I don't know, the power that you've given to the words?
I think my poetry changes as I grow older, that's for sure. I've sometimes performed poems from the 90s and I've stepped out as if I'm critiquing the younger poem and like laughing with the audience at the younger, not in a horrible way, not in a belittling way, but kind of in this. Sometimes we look back and the way we've written about something really captures a time. It might be something really sad or something amazing or something naughty or cheeky or mischievous. I like that about writing. We send postcards to ourselves through the times as we get older and older. I have been writing every day, all day for 30 years since I was 19. So yeah, and as a teenager, actually all my life, actually. So you send postcards to yourself, don't you? Of different eras and times. And then obviously things change. But some of the political poetry, you just change the prime minister, but it's the same issues. And literally the same scary stuff, just escalating and escalating. The political poetry moves and changes, but the fight is the same from century to century, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think with all your writing, like without a doubt, there's such a like a raw emotional honesty that I find so important. And actually it makes me feel less alone when I read your work or I hear things that you're saying because they resonate so deeply. But it's not always easy to talk about that stuff. And you write a lot about grief and love and identity. How do you, within yourself, create the space to be able to speak and write so openly about it? And not just it's not just getting the words on the paper, you're then sharing it with an unlimited number of people.
That's an unbelievably beautiful thing that you just said. Thank you so much. I love the idea that it makes you feel less alone. That's got to be one of my intentions, I'm sure.
Mhm.
That camaraderie and that sort of pulling people together. I think sometimes when I'm writing it, it's because I feel like I'm alone in a feeling or in a feeling. Or are you not all seeing this? What is us this time? Every day, another shock, another heartbreak, another travesty. I'd like to live in less eventful times. I'd love to wake up and have a little just staring at a daffodil feeling. Yeah, it's been a very tough couple of years, particularly the last decade. But I wouldn't be a Salena. I think if you picked me up and put me in any century or any time, I would always be this kind of Cassandra character calling out the thing. I think that's just the kind of character I am, like just coming round and round every century in a different vibration and a different body and form. I think that's just where I'm just that type of writer. I find it very difficult blithely act like I'm all right when I can tell other people aren't all right, and having some grace with that. I feel incredibly lucky for so many reasons. I feel lucky to survive. I feel lucky to have got to 52 because I think when I was younger, I was very reckless and very, and I wasn't looked after. Not only was I not looking after myself, no one was coming and picking me up, and I was quite, the animal that comes to mind all the time is like a little armadillo. But like, there's like a little armadillo just going, "Doo, doo, doo." And then once I was curled in my little ball, just writing poems, and then going back out with my little feet. That's exactly how I picture my younger self. But but yeah, I think that kind of walking in the fire and that courage held me in good stead. I feel really quite grateful for the younger recklessness that would hopefully grow into fearlessness. It's incredible being a writer that can see that. You map it all and write poetry about it as you go on your way.
Yeah, absolutely. And your latest poetry collection is called With Love, Grief and Fury. And before I even opened it, I was just like, this title is everything. There's such a deep connectedness between love, grief, and fury. And often I feel like we don't acknowledge the fury. It's so much of our life is about minimizing the anger and being kind and being gentle, especially as women, like being palatable. And I think to experience love and grief and to not also allow ourselves to leave into the fury is a huge injustice. But I wondered if you could take a moment to talk about the connectedness between the three: love, grief, and fury.
The connectedness between love, grief, and fury. I think they're all, a lot of it is all rooted in the same beast, and that's fear. So fear of losing love, or of love being lost, or and losing loved ones. That's been a really big theme in my work for a while now. And then when we have fury, I've always felt quite scared of quite how angry I am, and quite how much fury I am holding down and pushing down. And then grief, of course, how much grief we're pushing down and hiding and walking with. Grief grit, I call it. It's like this sort of grit that we've all got. And it's continuous, like it's there constantly, this kind of grit in everything. because we're not really given room or time to heal before the next thing. We're not given space before the next event, I feel. And I'm finding life is just going too fast. I know I sound like an old lady here, but it feels like time has speeded up and there's no space between massive event, massive trauma. There's no time to distill. We went through the pandemic and it felt like there was no break. There was no sort of national day of mourning. We went straight into normal life as normal. Everyone take your masks off and carry on. And people are still, getting sick now. So yeah, I'm very wary of that, of this kind of needing to take that breath and feel that grief. The other thing that I'm interested in trying to teach myself is the difference between the way we speak to fear and the way we speak to sorrow. Now, when I think I'm afraid, I will talk to myself like a bully. I will say, come on, buck up, don't be such a pessimist. Come on, rah, rah, you can do it, come on. And not let myself just be afraid. It's a scary world, it's a frightening world. Whereas if I'm sad or with sorrow, I'll go, oh, are you okay? Would you like a cake? Would you like a cup of tea? Oh. So when we talk to a sadness, we're very kind and soft. But when we talk to fear, we tend to be a little bit bullying. And I really want to check in with that because I want to stop doing that to myself and to others. And I think we should all do it. Stop doing it to ourselves. Stop treating fear like, come on, you can do it. Sometimes just fear is quite a healthy response. I think the way we speak to ourselves is a good place to begin, and then the way we speak to others, and then it grows and grows into the community. I think the community is in sorrow, and the community is in fear, and the community is in, all those things, love, grief, and fury. Yeah.
Yeah. And also, what I love about your work is that you, especially when it comes to loss and grief, you write to personal experiences of loss and grief, but you also write to collective injustice and the loss and the grief that comes with that. And obviously, like we've seen over the last year and 3 months or 4 months with everything that's been happening in Gaza and the images that have been coming out, especially. And that's not to minimize anything else happening around the world, but I think it has been so intense and on a level I don't think any of us have ever witnessed before. And I think when you are experiencing something on such a huge scale, but there's also like personal loss within that, like you're looking at personal stories of other people, but also your own life is also going ahead and there's so much loss all the time and so much grief. How do we navigate that sort of personal within the wider picture, but also I guess like the personal within the political, because not we can't just look at what's happening in Gaza, for example, through the lens of loss. We have to look at it through the lens of politics and injustice. How do we navigate that sort of personal and the political?
How do we navigate I don't know. How do we? How are you doing navigating it?
Not very well.
How how are we doing it? I'm trying. We must stay like alert and wit and strong, but also somehow still soft and yielding, so we don't get hard and bitter. Yeah, it's a very like you said, it's something that we haven't seen before or experienced before. I don't think you're supposed to see this. You're supposed to see the obliteration of children and families and houses and life and heart and health of the planet and the people in your eyes before you've even had a cup of coffee every day, in this constant, unchecked, unpunished way. Like in this, I don't think it's not supposed to happen.
It's not supposed to happen. Yeah, absolutely.
In the first place. Never mind we're not supposed to see it. Never mind it's being filmed. But then never mind if it wasn't being filmed, what would we be not seeing if there weren't cameras? Or what have we not been seeing before the invention of the phones?
Yeah.
It shows us how we've all been living in this kind of lollipop, pink, fuzzy story. And then they gave us all phones and we all became journalists. And we all couldn't say we didn't see it happen. Can you imagine if we'd had like mobile phones for the last 100 years, the things that would have been filmed in the race riots, in police brutality, in going right back. Imagine if the suffragette had a mobile phone. Go back through history. So in a way, it's better. It's good. It's good. We know. We're learning. We're aware. My head is swimming with things to say now. I'm not really sure what to say now, except to keep your heart open and to keep your mind open and keep your eyes open. Keep reading. Keep witnessing. Um, Donate where you can. Share where you can. God, it doesn't sound enough, does it? It's not enough. There's a part of me that wishes I was, well, going back to fear again, I wishes I was fearless and would just jump on my horse in some loan of arc armor and go and help someone. I've got this image in my head that, yeah, that the armor would be really heavy and I'd get as far as about 5 miles down the road and then need a pee and then I would walk armor off. Have this vision in my head. I don't know about you. I watch quite a lot of dark television and TV shows, dystopian stuff. It's not for me. It is not nourishing or edifying. I don't know what they do. And in these things, everyone's so organized, and the women in these things, I don't. Or even if you look at a movie like Alien, Sigourney Weaver's really fit in like a vest with really strong arms. I always think at the end of the world, I'm suddenly going to be super fit and look really in that. A really nice buzz cut, shaved head. This killer image of you going into a gas station, bleaching your own, shaving your head, and finding the suitcase of money and driving off and knowing how to hotwire a car suddenly, knowing how to sew up a wound. Suddenly you're going to know these things. You don't know these things. You don't. You don't really know these things. These are just stories and movies.
Yeah. I think for me, because obviously with everything happening in Gaza, it went on to that extent for so long. I think we live in a world that is constantly championing individualism. It's constantly telling you to do what you need to do to survive, to put yourself first, to think of your interests, to think of your financial interests and put yourself first. And it seems politics has been something for so long that is being told to us is it's separate from you. It it may govern, if we just think about local politics, it may dictate some of the rules. It's fine, you can vote, and it seems to be this thing like, okay, well, just be aware so that you know what's happening.
Mm.
Keep yourself informed, and there has always been this. It's good to keep yourself informed, so like, but there's been such a disconnect between the personal and the political, and it's been championed, I think, for centuries and in every sphere of life. But I think what has become so alarmingly clear to so many people is that there is no separation. And this isn't new. We've known for ages. We've known since the race riots. We've known like for a really long time that you cannot separate the two because the personal impacts, the politics impacts the personal. And especially like for me as a brown Muslim woman living in the UK, my life is so heavily political and politicized. I don't know what that separation feels like. And I feel like because of that, I'm always on high alert and I'm always grieving. I'm always feeling lost. I'm always feeling fear and fury. I feel like I have a lot of anger over things, over the small microaggressions I experience. And now I have a huge amount of anger because I'm seeing what's happening around the world. And I think I've always had that. But I think what I am glad to see is that there does seem to be this larger awakening happening. That's this understanding that we're not divorced from politics. We cannot separate ourselves. We cannot say, oh, I'm not getting involved because that's too political. We can't think that voting in an MP once a year or government every 5 years or whatever it is enough. Politics is in our everyday life. Well, I remember when I was going to university and I wrote a personal statement. The opening line of my personal statement, because I studied politics, the opening line of my personal statement said something like, politics governs my everyday life from the price of a loaf of bread to the perception of a Muslim boarding the train. And I applied to uni back in 2009. And it's still that is true, and it is more true now than it was then, and it's more scary now than it was then. But yeah, so I think that awakening and that sort of to really embrace that sort of combination between the personal and the political, and to not shy away from it, because I think the more we do, the worse a position we put ourselves in.
That's fantastic. All of that. I love that as the first line of your opening statement. It's true though. What isn't
Mm.
political? It's just all such hard. It's just such hard work. I've just this morning been on the phone with my doctor, just trying to get my medicine. Do you know how hard it's been just to get a phone call with my doctor and just to get my HRT, just my menopause stuff? And the tone in his voice was so patronizing. He's not my regular doctor. He's just some doctor ringing me. And he was just so treating me like I literally, because of this short story I've been writing as well, like you literally sound like you're going to go, oh, hysterical woman. Well, you are a witch, may as well burn you or something. I don't know. It's just making me sound crazy. And that thing that they do, that the sexism and the way you're patronized and yeah, it's everything, every moment in some ways in that way, political and personal, even if it's as simple as just getting your medicine. Yesterday when I was in the chemist, I got some moisturizer. I didn't mean to get moisturizer. The woman stopped me and she grabbed me and I'm so want to make people happy. I'm like, hello. And she's like, can I do a survey on you? I'm like, okay. Survey done on my face. And then she wanted my email and all my information. And I thought, she's literally data sweeping me my moisturizer that I didn't even want, but she's told me I need because I've got all these things wrong with my face apparently. But yeah, it's very weird. You're constantly being sold things you don't really want to impost people you don't even know. It's all the wrong way around. It is.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And so with Love, Grief, and I mean, I absolutely loved the poetry collection. So many of them just spoke so deeply to me. And I know that it's a collection that sort of spans a few years. It's not just one, it's not one that you wrote specifically for this collection all in one go. And so you cover a lot of issues, you write a lot about the planet and the injustices that we're doing against the planet and what's happening, but also love and loss, um, menopause, perimenopause, and menopause. And you also write about motherhood and the decision that some women take or some people take to not have children. Now, I thought it was really beautiful and really powerful to decide to include that topic, but just the way that you've written about it. Now, I think that motherhood is such a fascinating topic. I don't have any children of my own, but I think that there is a lot now anyway written about motherhood. Not necessarily the choice to be a mother, but the experience of being a mother. I feel like and I'm somebody that has had quite a few years of struggle with infertility, and it's a journey I'm still on, and I'm hopeful will give me happiness at some point with regards to that. But it is a struggle, and I think that there is a little bit more being written about what if you're somebody that wants to have children but doesn't have children, how do you navigate the world, and is there enough consideration to people like myself. But I haven't seen very much at all for people that have decided not to have children, and I feel like it is the thing that is minimized so massively, and it takes away from what a big decision it actually is. And I feel like because people find it so easy to say, people can say to me like, oh, they can sit with me, they can sit with sympathy or empathy and understand that this is something that I really want and it's not happening. So it's almost like it's not my fault that I don't have children. But when it comes to somebody that's decided that they don't want to have children, it's just a completely different ball game. Like it's just a completely different perception. People don't really understand it, don't consider it to be a valid enough choice. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about that and about the need to really understand that choice as well.
Oh. Wow. Okay. So I think people should be free
Yeah.
to choose to do what they want to do. All people. My decision to not have children has many layers to it. Firstly, I didn't meet the person that I felt safe with or I wasn't together with the person I felt safe with until I was in my 40s. So that kind of the boat had gone. So the person that I wanted to have children with, it was too late. But secondly, it's been so difficult to do this path, to be a writer. I won't name any names, but I was actually talking to a writer the other day, and there's quite a lot of young artists and writers that don't have children so they can pursue careers in writing and in the arts because there's no funding, because you're taking a massive risk. When I was starting out in the early 90s, I thought it was all very romantic to starve and be warmed by a candle. No, Wanda is my warmth and light. And that was all very romantic and cool, and drinking cheap wine and having a blue tongue and being all a little bit rock and roll. And I thought that was all very romantic and would make me a great writer. I thought that great writing came from pain. And so I would have these terrible adventures with awful boys, terrible stories, breaking my heart left, right, and center, and girls. And I would think, oh, it's all part of it. It was all good for the stories. And my little broken heart sitting there writing these things. And it's taken decades to realize that you can be healthy and happy and loved and maybe have some food in the fridge and look after yourself and be loved and also loving. You don't have to be locked away in this pain dungeon to make great work. You can be in a healthy and happy relationship with yourself and with the world and still make great work. Took decades to learn that. So yeah, I didn't want to bring a child into this chaos, into this recklessness that was my 20s and 30s. It wouldn't need to be quite so scary. But I didn't have a big sister. I didn't have someone looking out for me. I didn't really have that. So that's definitely something that I try to be to young poets and young writers now. The thing that I was missing. Um, and to bring that kind of energy and to be there. I get quite a lot of emails and messages from young writers and poets, and I love that. And I love that being a voice for that because, I don't know. It's quite sad actually when I look back on it. Quite how resilient that little armadillo had to be. Yeah. So I made some decisions and did things because I really did feel like I was alone in the world with it all. The other thing is that I famously always get up at 4 in the morning to write, and everyone think this is some kind of discipline that goes in the same group as someone that drinks kale smoothies, and that it's some kind of yoga kale smoothie head mindset that does that. It's something like that. There's absolutely nothing to do with kale smoothies. It's to do with promising myself that I will have that time because I am a woman in a family with family and friends. And the role that I play in my family is I'm there for everyone, as I'm sure you are for your siblings and aunts and uncles and everybody. And you're just a writer. So they know you're working at home most of the time and they'll ring you anytime. But at 4 in the morning, they're all asleep. In theory, everyone is in bed. In theory, everyone is in bed and safe and sound at 4 in the morning. And I can work as selfishly as a man. That's why I'll get up at 4 in the morning. Well, it has nothing to do with being some kind of disciplined, high meditating kale smoothie person. It's to do with stealing time so that I can be completely switch off from everything. No one's going to be emailing you or phoning you from about 4 in the morning until approximately, I don't know, 10, 11 in the morning. You have carved out almost a whole chunk of time to just switch off and not need to be available. As women in our families, whether you're a mother or not, are available for your vulnerable family members and your friends and people and peers in your work. And you just are. You're just made like that. I don't know you, but from the age of 3, I was taught to sew on buttons and iron. And while my brother was out playing on his bike, this sort of I can do it, I will do it attitude is very much drummed into me from a very early age. My Jamaican grandmother saw to that. Yeah, it's a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think when it comes to just the way that the choice to not have children is perceived, sometimes it's looked at as like a very self-centered decision. And I think one of the saddest things about how it is perceived is that there isn't an acknowledgement that there may also be sadness and grief, even if you are content with your decision, even if you know that this was the right decision for you and for your world and for your partner or whatever it may be. That doesn't mean that it's devoid of grief or loss or sadness. And I wondered if you could speak to that, if that at all is correct.
I suppose in a way, when you're a writer, you're constantly writing stories and the narrator in your head. So I've imagined it. Of course I
Yeah.
have. I've imagined what my children might have looked like or what I might have named them. In fact, to be honest with you, I didn't really have much interest in it, really. Smelly nappies and sweet babies, I just makes me go, oh, I'd rather do anything else than that. I didn't really play with dolls much. I was much more into climbing trees and riding my bike. I was never really, that's not really in me. Maybe I'm very maternal anyway. But yes, you do write the stories, you do imagine what could have been. You do wonder who on earth is going to look after you when you get old. I'm not going to have anyone visit me in my old people's home. But yeah, there's so many layers to it. I didn't actually think I was going to live past 40. So that was the other thing as well. Not to go too dark. My father hung himself at 40, and everyone always said how much I'm like him, and I believed that I would follow that path. That when I say reckless, I don't just mean in action and thought as well. So I was quite, and again, no sort of counselling or help in any way in those thoughts and in those unwanted thoughts and projections I was putting onto myself, which I don't. Obviously, I'm somewhere else now. But that as well was another key factor, that I was worried that I would do something and then leave an orphan with no mother, who would then spend their whole life wondering what their mother was like, in the way that I, as a young girl, wondered what my father was like all my life, because he died when I was 9. And to leave a child like that just felt really cruel. And so that was another factor. There were so many factors. So it was a kind of a kindness as opposed to a selfish thing, I didn't know then what I know now. My 40s were amazing. I'm 52 now. The last 12 years of my life have been amazing. As soon as I outlived my dad, as soon as I got to 40, it was like this light just came. This shadow moved, and I just learned some stuff. I just whatever block was going on was removed, like this rock was removed, and I just started living. I published for the first time when I was 40, and I'd spent my whole 20s and 30s in the wilderness, unable to get a book deal, and I've got together with my partner and got engaged and all this stuff, safety, love. Yeah, yeah. I think of myself as a flower that took a while to open. I
A late bloomer, as they say.
Well, yeah, exactly that.
Oh.
I feel like I didn't really get going with living until I was 40, really.
Wow, that's really beautiful. And I think, yeah, a lot of people feel like they get to 40 and it's just like, oh my gosh, what's happening? Has everything, oh, my best years over? But actually, it could be a second lease of life. It could be the start of something really amazing.
I think so. And I think menopause is magic. I think you go back to being a magic superhero. I don't want to sound, oh, I'm just going to say, when I was a kid, I really loved being a child. I really loved it. And I had a lot of magical experiences as a child, and I could dream in this really vivid way. And I feel like I saw ghosts, and I felt like really in touch with the different realms of the world and the imagination and then that all stopped when my dad died when I was 9. And then as I started entering menopause and getting into my 40s, it all started coming back, the same dreams, things, and I'm like, wow, you go full circle. And then you're a child, and then you go through puberty and you lose the magic. And then you go into menopause and you regain the sight and the vision and this sort of intuition and this good stuff. Honestly, get to menopause, it's amazing. Because I remember when I was a kid, this boy, I don't know if it was a ghost or maybe just it was a narrator in my head, and saying how much I would hate the middle bit. That it was like you really loved being a child and you really loved being an old woman. And I think that's what I've always really believed. The middle is annoying. When I was cute and thin, it was fun being cute and thin, but it was annoying. It got in the way of what my purpose is. Or every time I get a grey hair, I'm really happy. And I think when my full power is when I'm going to be white haired, sort of lady, like, like some kind of amazing Maya Angelou character. But where I'd like to be in my 60s and 70s. Yeah.
And you've obviously in Springfield Road, your memoir, that's predominantly about your childhood. But the thing about childhood is that writing about it now, there's a really slipperiness of memory. How did you navigate that? Like, how did you know what you remembered and what maybe memories you formed because of things that you were told or things that you later found out? Like, yeah, how do you know what you actually remember of your childhood?
Ah, okay. I'm glad you brought this up because I just want to say like how privileged and I felt to be able to revisit that book and republish it in 2024 with Canongate. I spent my entire 30s working on that book, so almost for a decade. And it was a life raft to write it. It was my job. It was my sole thing that I was working on in my 30s, in between millions of gigs and festivals. And when you're in your 30s, being 10 was last week. But when you're in your 50s, being 10 years old is a really long time ago. There is no way I could write that book now. So that book feels like a gift to me now because it so vividly captures what it was like to grow up in the 70s and 80s and to be the brown girl in the school and to be so much bullying, so much racism that I had to put up with, that we all had to put up with in that era. And obviously the rise of Margaret Thatcher and all the disparity and poverty. And yeah, it was, yeah, like this. But this is where this all began, I think, with Thatcher, really. I still deeply dislike Margaret Thatcher, even to this day. I remember marching around the playground singing Thatcher Milk Snatcher, create rallies in the playground. It was such a little upsetter even then. And I can remember trying to get all the girls to hold hands in a big chain and go across the playground, sweeping the boys out of the playground. But being, but yeah, went to republish it. To republish that book was a great honor and privilege. I just want to say that because when I accepted the challenge to rewrite some bits and to go do another edit of it and we get it back into print, and I wrote a whole essay about this, about how it felt. Because I thought it would break my heart to go back over that, to go back over being 9 and how it felt to lose my dad and to go back to there. But what actually broke my heart was going back to see this young writer struggling so hard to get that book published and get that book into print and being rejected left, right, and center. And sort of, and I like like the image that comes to my mind always is like a marble being rolled down a bowling alley. It's like, can anyone see me? No. And yeah, so that's that image and that vibe. What I'm trying to say is I thought I was going to go back to pick up one child, to hold one child, one memory, but it was like going back to pick up two. So not just the young 10-year-old who's grieving, but also the 30-year-old with unchecked historical trauma and unchecked grief that hadn't even been held. And so I went back and held both of them. I did some really intense therapy, EMDR therapy, whilst I was working on this new version of it. Just protect myself a bit and to heal myself a bit and to check in with all of those things that I'd never talked about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so Obviously, so much of your memoir is about that 9, 10-year-old girl that has lost her father, navigating becoming a family of initially three with your mother and brother. And there's a lot of reflection in the book about the things left unsaid, the things you didn't hear, the things you didn't see, you didn't know. Did writing the book, even in your 30s and then revisiting it later, do you feel like it's helped you reconnect with your father who was absent for so long in your life? And yeah, did it help, I guess, with coming to, I don't know, some sort of like peace with some of the things that you had experienced as a child and you probably still carry?
I think the main thing with that book to me is when I was writing it, there was a real passion, for want of a better word, a real trend for misery memoirs. And I didn't want this to be that. I didn't want it to be a misery memoir. There's a lot of hope in that book. The arc could be the men in the family, predominantly my father, hanging himself. But I think there's a stronger arc in that, and it's the women in my family, my incredible mother, who I'm still very close with, who loves the book and has read it multiple times and thanked me for writing it. And then, of course, my two grandmothers, my Irish grandmother and my Jamaican grandmother, the women in that are the power in that for me. Although there is this other arc going on, I think it's the women's stories that are really punching through. Yeah. And even that I am glad I told and could share.
Yeah, absolutely. And I loved
Thank you for asking.
yeah, I loved reading the memoir and learning about your grandmothers and also like I guess the when you started living in a Jamaican household and like how all of everything changed. But it was such a obviously like a tumultuous time for such a young girl. Like we see the resilience you have now and just reading the book, we can see it. We can see it there, we can see the fire, we can see the questioning and the sort of understanding of justice even at such a young age. Thank you for writing it because I found it really powerful. And there's a lot of hope in that book, definitely too.
Yeah.
Do you think that if you could go back to the young girl, to the 9-year-old girl, and looking at who you are today, what would you say to that 9-year-old girl about who you've become?
Wow. It's one of those questions where I cringe because you're going to make me flatter myself, and I'm not good at that. I do my jumper now. Um, yeah. Am I proud of where I've got to? Yeah. Would my 9-year-old self be proud of me? Would my 30-year-old self be proud of me? Yeah. But also, I deeply have so much work to do. I haven't even started with what I intend to do and wish to do and hope to do and want to do with writing, with poetry, with my influence on other writers and poets to pull more writers through. I don't just leave the ladder there. I'm chucking loads of ladders down. I'm I'm pulling people up as much as I can to get more. It's a very selfish thing. It's just so these parties aren't so boring. There's a few more of my people there. No, I'm kidding. But am I? No, I am. But I think, yeah, I think the 9-year-old and those two young lives that made that book are just feel so far away from me now, and I would just hold them, yeah, and listen.
Yeah. And you did talk about briefly about your mother and your grandmothers, but what are some of the biggest lessons or just like the biggest lessons that you've learned from them? What are some of the things that they've taught you over the years that have carried you and helped you become who you are today?
Wow, that's such a deep question. Oh, you're good. Okay. Okay, because the stood with the I with my father's side, we've got Edith Godden, and her kindness and generosity in saving my father from the orphanage and everything. There's some real fearless stuff, fearless and selfless acts going act there, and just how she was always so kind and so generous and fostered loads of children in the house being full of lost souls. I think I've definitely got some of that. So we have Edith Godden, who adopts my father and saves him from an orphanage and brings him up as a single mother during wartime and at the end of the war. When I think there's a real courage there and a real kindness and generosity there. And then we have the mother, the 15-year-old Irish girl who we don't know where she went. And there's a real mystery there. And there's a part of me that really hopes that she found happiness and that she was okay. It troubled my father a lot to never find his true birth mother, this 15-year-old Irish girl. I've got all the paperwork and everything of the adoption and stuff, and she was 15, but I don't have an address for where she came from in Ireland, just that she was working here as a scullery maid, like a sort of Downton Abbey scenario, and she was working downstairs, and just a 15-year-old girl. So there's a sadness there, sorrows that I feel forever for her, or whatever happened, but I just hope something great happened, and that, she's anything like me, and she's a survivor. I must have got it from somewhere. As for my Jamaican side, my Jamaican grandmother, she was amazing. She was just so amazing and just so kind and so strong. Quiet though, so much patience, quiet patience. I never really got my head around that. I think this very quiet stillness. I'm trying to learn where you get that from or how you can cultivate that. Yeah. Yeah, the women in the family. But my mum I speak to my mum every day. We're very close, very close.
Yeah.
Love.
That's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing. And you're constantly writing and in the summer, like doing events, and you're very busy. But can you tell us a little bit about what's next for you? What you're working on, what we can expect in 2025?
Oh, okay. Working on some secret things, and even though you've got a very kind face, I'm not going to tell you. So some top secret things, not what you think. The one thing you can guarantee about me is I'm unpredictable. I'm unpredictable. This was said about me the other day, and I thought, unpredictable. Oh, and then I've decided to embrace it. I think being unpredictable is cool, so I'm happy.
Yeah.
I'll embrace it. It's a compliment. It's not a flaw. I actually think it's a good thing to be unpredictable. I am unpredictable, so I'm doing some unpredictable things. But what I can tell you about is I'm working hard on my new novel, which is the new Mrs. Death Universe novel. The title is The Life of Life, and it's not what you think. And I'm going to surprise you with that one. But all I can tell you, yeah, it's the kind of sister book to Mrs. Death, Mrs. Death. So it's life as your narrator. And that's all I can really say, Rick. But reunited with some old faces from the first book, Time and Mrs. Death. And we see the sisters. And yeah, I probably shouldn't say anymore. I'm excited about it, though. I'm very excited about it. And I'm into it. I've been working on this whole universe for about 10 years. So it's a long thing. So I'm just trying to get it right. I'm hoping to make a trilogy, but for now, if it ends up being a duology, then that would be great as well. But with just one book at a time. If I'd start thinking like that, I get really overwhelmed.
Yeah. Yeah.
So writing wise, that's my main thing. But then I'm doing quite a few of these short stories. Seem to be writing horror stories. Like, where's this all come from? I don't know. Maybe because the world is a horror show. These dark, twisted horror stories. But I think there's quite a lot of that in Mrs. Death. In fact, I think I've always written horror stories, actually. And when I go back to me as a child at school, I used to write these really dark vampire stories and horror stories. I think it's both than ghosts and the darkness, and yeah, it's always been in my work. And then what else? Yeah, a couple of trips, few festivals. I don't know what I'm allowed to tell you, but The Life of Life isn't published till 2026. So this year I'm taking my foot off the gas a little bit and won't be sort of so promotionally brained, which is really rad. Because yeah, I think I've done 5 books in 5 years
Wow.
over the last. So it's quite a lot of promo marketing touring, pushing. So I'm going to take my foot off the gas with all that. But on a more personal level, my catchphrase is less computer activity, more community activity.
Sounds beautiful.
I'm really tired. I've literally got more rest from typing so much and sore shoulders, and want to be out seeing people more, not even in a work way, just seeing, and not even, yeah. I went to see a beautiful band play on Friday, nothing to do with work. So nice to just stand there and listen to some live music. Yeah, what am I doing? I'm just like racing around. So, yeah. So this year's a slightly fallow year, but then next year, the cogs will start turning again, ready for the new novel. Oh, I do hope you like it. But
It sounds brilliant. And as we end, like I know that you do a lot to support and uplift other writers. But for anyone listening that is working on something or wants to enter the world of writing, do you have any advice?
my main thing is to not listen to advice. Listen to the voice in your belly. Listen to the voice in you. Nobody knows what you're going to achieve. Nobody knows what you're going to do with your gift, your talent, your story, your words. You don't know who you're reaching or who's listening or who is following and what doors and windows you're opening in people's minds. I love that I see that so clearly. I think I see that so clearly. I think every story is so valuable. Every song, every perception, every narration of this time, whether you're writing deeply personal stuff or deeply political, as we were talking about earlier. Excuse me. I don't think there's a very fine line between the two now. And a record of this time, whether you're recording it through fiction or through poetry or memoir or your journalism or through song or art, it's all so valuable. As 100 years from now, we'll want to understand what the heck went on. And the only way they're really going to get a true story is through the art and poetry and music of the time, surely.
Yeah, absolutely. Salena, thank you. Thank you so much for your time today and for sharing so much. It's been such an honor and a privilege speaking to you on the show today.
I've really loved meeting you and chatting with you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
I hope you loved listening to this episode and found things that will stay with you. I'd love to hear from you, so please do reach out on social media and don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a review, as it can really help.